Hi everyone, it's Jerry. LeelaKnightOdds and Hikaru Nakamura played a 16-game blitz match. I'm going to share each of these games with you here from Leela's perspective, skimming through them, providing some light comments throughout. These games were played on May the 4th. I'll also include just the evaluation, how Stockfish 17.1 is seeing each of these games as the moves are playing through. Nakamura had a fresh account for these games. His new handle on Lichess, Wherefore Art Thou? One final note, I initially recorded all of these games using Lichess's real-time feature as I have done in the past. That was an hour plus record. At the end of the day, a technical issue on my end. So trying to once more view these in real time would not have the same feel. So with that aside, let's dive in here. Game number 1. Okay, D-pawn based opening. And I would say already at this early stage, it's comfortable for Nakamura. Just the type of position, this half open position. Exchanges are going to be likely, and that's going to be good news for the side up the piece. Of course, there's a little something there for Leela. A pawn on e5. More exchanges. There was a skewer idea. Rook d1 is out of that. Babysitting this pawn before the queen tries to be aggressive here on g7. Queen takes e5 would be there. Castles, rook e1. Normally you wouldn't play in this way, abandoning the open file, but you don't want to trade too much. We know where the black rooks are going to be shortly, so rook e1 it is. Pressure on g2, defense. Got a pin as well. And now a big intersection square for Nakamura on d3. There's pretty much no stopping something from diving in there. And in this game, it's the knight that hops in with the fork. Now we're looking at a bishop advantage. Very smooth approach here so far by Nakamura. After b3, before putting the bishop here, we get a rook exchange. More good news for Nakamura. And more exchanges. So, I mean, what's the try here by Leela? How to stir up trouble. You could dream of pawn on h6, queen getting here, but it's defendable. This is a fantastic piece. The queen on e7 is not only defending, but attacking, placing a restriction, we might say, on h4. All right, a threat here, easily parried. Rook lift. How to get more exchanges. Let's see. Queenside structure changing slightly. There we go with f6. Once the rook is pulled off of the c file, once rook c7 is no longer some idea. Okay, simplifying now. Queen takes pawn, queen f4, queens are off the board. Bishop versus pawn imbalance at the moment, but this pawn is tracked. We are now looking at a full bishop advantage. How to convert. Let us see the technique here. There's no wrong colored bishop thing to worry about. We're not working with any rook pawns here. The one thing you have to just watch out for, these pawns being exchanged. It'll be a draw if that's the case. So a little floundering here. Let's see if you can find the way. Flying through here. Yeah, trying to converge here on f3 is the plan. So just a moment away from this. Leela out of the pin. The rook in a spot stopping this post. Tricky, tricky. Okay, now it's hit twice. And now the king is approaching, and Leela goes into this pin. This pawn will now, after e4, be down for the count. Any tricks left in the position? Well, yes. Leela always seems to find some kind of trickery here. You capture the rook, it's stalemate. Okay, Nakamura saw that one coming. King captures rook there, was not forced. And it is pretty much smooth sailing from here. Just pushing that passed pawn. The rook is going to have to give itself up shortly. A rook check flicked in just to make sure there isn't any stalemate tricks. Let the king have more options. Just put the rook on the h-file there. And I believe that's the train of thought, really, at that stage. And of course, this here will be converted. No issues with the clock working with the increment here. Game number 1 goes to Nakamura. Okay. Game 2. Let us see. A Jobava start here. And space on the king side. Big center. I'm almost certain I've had this same position playing against Leela. And my experience is that it's tricky to do something with this knight. And working around this space. This surfaces quite a bit, this pawn on g5. Very sensitive square here on c5. All right. Let's get some more moves in here. Nakamura, like in that first game, half open position, looking forward to, with this move, a bunch of exchanges. This is a big blunder. He totally missed. Bishop h3 is there. The queen is now toast. He plays on for just a little bit more. And it seems like, okay, you're going to get some material, but there's this fancy move now, queen e1. Pawn takes bishop, queen takes bishop. Rook captures bishop played here. And after c3, we have resignation. The rook cannot stay defending the bishop. Play here, here, there's b3, cutting out those squares. And all right, that one's definitely going to be a win for Leela. A 21 mover in game number 2. Game 3. Okay, e4, e5 game with the very early f4 and c4. So, as I'm playing through these games, something to certainly think about is, can I maybe get away with playing in a similar fashion, with still the king knight around? Are certain setups still possible? Okay, this pawn here, a thorn in black side, space on the king side very early. More pawns running down, a lot of space for Leela, now on the king side. When I was initially viewing these games with the real-time feature, I was expecting this pawn to go straight ahead, more space. But I think maybe there would be a sacrifice on f6. I don't know. Not how Leela plays it here, though. Just stays put. I guess a downside with making an early commitment with the pawn is that the knight, the bishop, have access to this e6 square. So this pawn stays put. Fancy little rook maneuver. And let's get to a bit more of an interesting position. Normally, you would be thrilled about this exchange. Right, it's the good bishop being exchanged for Nakamura's bad bishop. So now there is a fantastic square here on d4. How is Leela going to handle this? This is a big positive for Leela. This tension right here, really. Is there going to be a push? Is there going to be a capture? When is that capture going to occur? Okay, queen e7, queenside castles, and already not feeling so comfortable. He's making a run for it here. Not too excited about castling kingside. Let's see where that king is headed. Some 7th rank defense. All while working around this pesky knight. That's finally being challenged here. And you could, of course, see the clock times here. See how Leela's putting pressure on the clock in each of these games. There was a threat there on a5. Knight captures, and this is important follow-up here. Right around the corner, Nakamura could maybe have some lockdown. What am I talking about? Knight on c5 and a4. That grip over b3. This knight is in just a moment going to be a monster. So this is the moment for the position to open up, targeting the rook and swiping the knight before it could hop in. Now this rook, super duper active. Still up the piece, but how good is that piece? All right, let's get some more moves in here. Queenside opening up some. Down to a minute here for Nakamura. There goes a pawn. I was thinking when I was initially looking at it that maybe the rook, there are ideas to just let the rook sit there, and if captured, you're working with the passed f-pawn, but okay, in this one, Nakamura is trying to get active with the rook. Cost there, the g-pawn, and now there's a passed g-pawn. Okay, the d-pawn is swiped, but the thing here, the rook is not really coordinated with any other piece. And now Leela is ready to dive in to the second rank and kind of flounders here. There really isn't a good option. I mean, look at the clock time too. Just kind of living off of the increment at this stage, does not find the way. After this capture, it is over. A resigner here after 44 moves. Okay, moving on. Next game here, a c4 start, a kingside fianchetto, and a double fianchetto coming up here. I believe I have some experience with the eventual structure we see in this game, namely this one right here. Normally you would be thrilled with this sequence right here. You take on c4, you're eliminating a super strong bishop. And as I was playing through this, my initial pass there with using the real-time feature, I was already looking at this because I believe I've had this happen to me before. This g-pawn just being pushed right down my throat playing on the black side. It does surface. So pawn going to be controlling this f6 square. A question here, when is the best time for that? Not played straight away. We have some more rook improvements. g5 only now with tempo. I believe if you play g5 maybe at this moment here, maybe f6, and the position is opening up and simplifications are much more likely. Okay, rook d1, only after bishop f6, we have g5 with tempo. And now we have this unopposed bishop. And keep on pushing the pawns. These dark squares are going to be broken down. There we go. The plan with bishop a1, a battery right around the corner. So I believe with Nakamura's next move, queen b8, he's prepared to meet this with e5. You take with the pawn, then there's this idea to blockade. Okay, let's see how play develops from here. We get the battery. Diagonal shut down with that pawn sacrifice. This pawn could be scooped up. But this rook going to be opposite the knight, controlling a lot of the knight's forward squares if the knight does in fact hop into e4. Finds a way to maybe work around the knight if it goes in that direction. Ends up going to f7 here. There is a pin. Both rooks here barreling down towards the black king. Possibilities of a capture. Capture on c4, defense there. And now a pawn sacrifice. Structure here is negating, one way to look at it, negates the knight. And this rook. Okay, here comes knight takes e. Now this follow-up e4 break. f5 getting broken down now. And exploiting the pin, pressure on the knight. Okay, this is collapsing. And in fact, star finish to this one. Queen takes g6. Check. Stunning move here. Pawn takes queen played. And now the only winning way, final move of this game, h7 check. Every other move in Nakamura would be winning. If you just take straight away, king h7, there isn't a great way to get at the king, but with h7, this will lead to mate. King takes pawn, check, checkmate. Look at that bishop working from afar. And if rook takes, chop the pawn, you have to block. You take a rook, and then we're going to have mate with rook h5. So that was a flashy finish to that one, to be sure. Moving on. An e4, e5 game with this super conservative follow-up, bishop to e2. Okay. I've been in these positions before. It feels comfortable, and then just somehow it just gets out of control. So let's see how this one develops. Of course, not allowing exchanges, shutting down the bishop activity there. Also, this structure controlling the knight. I believe when I was first looking at this game, I was thinking the G pawn was going to start to go wild, as it frequently does. Not here, though. An oddball move coming up, king to d1. So no kingside castles. I guess that would maybe be pretty tricky with this bishop here on this diagonal. How do you get that in without getting a dark square bishop exchange? All right, it's not on the cards. The king is castling, we might say, by hand here on the c2 square. That's its home. Okay. Bad bishop, a very active bad bishop being exchanged for black's good bishop. And some control over the knight there. Reposition. Possible tricks here on a4. You give that piece back at any moment. Swipe 2 pawns. Knight negated there with g6. Pressure on the knight. Simple defense. Right around the corner. Peeling open the h-file. All right, in the meantime, Nakamura looks to double on the d-file. I guess that's going to be too much pressure. Gets one rook exchange in there, and now hints at h5. Goes for the sacrifice now. Knight for 2 pawns. How is Leela supposed to defend this? King b1. Rook lift. Queen a2. This paves the way for king a1. Provides an escape hatch there for the king with the queen on a2. So a 2-pawn advantage. Bishop now swarming in. Bishop c1. There is a pin here. Also coverage of b2. Rook b3 to defend. Now the rook is sneaking in to assist. And finally, the knight. Right around the corner, there's knight d2. This rook is all of a sudden a bit stuck. Okay, pawn runs. Rook is defended. Knight b1. Going after this bishop. We're pulled into a queenless ending now. And you have to be careful here as Nakamura, because this pawn is ready to fall. Babysits it. Knight hops in. Rook preventing maybe a knight jump here. Possible fork. Right around the corner, there's this idea to maybe just go hunting with the king. There is a more active king position here for Leela. Nakamura at this stage, his approach is to take a 3-fold repetition. Okay, moving on here. Next game, an e4, e5 start. This is a strong approach right here. Immediately challenging that e5 pawn. We're seeing a similar, the same approach as an earlier game here. Let's see where we deviate in this one. We've had this same position before where the knight went to h7. He's trying something else. And this time around, the knight goes to d7 this time. Bishop g2. Castle's on board. And you really don't want to take like this, but the bishop could end up kind of staring off into space if you don't. All right, we get that capture. This knight boxed out now. These knights really do not sit so well. So once more, this is the big positive for Leela. And these pawns here on the king side, and add the unopposed dark square bishop to the list. Okay, queen e7, h4. Already kind of irritating. Look at the amount of time, in fact, Nakamura spent at this stage. A good minutes spent on this decision to castle queenside. If you go kingside, I believe you could take. Leela could take there and then push. Actually, on second thought, no, I don't think that is an option because there's this counter punch, but it's risky to castle on the same side where your opponent has this space here. I mean, you start to wonder, is this an idea, in fact, with some sacrifice over here? I wouldn't be surprised if that is maybe an idea with these knights far away as well from defending the king if he's on the queen side, or excuse me, the king side. Anyhow, it's queen side castles in this one. Ready to dislodge the knight. He interferes with that. And the queen continues to be a pest, welcoming any discovery. I guess Leela's ready for whatever. Knight here, queen here, and there's no good move for the knight. Pretty much has to just return to c6. So the queen is given a kick with the pawn. King b8. More space here on both wings. The extra piece, one of these two, not so well positioned. All right, let's get some more moves in here. f6 and bishop e3. To be a little careful right here, Nakamura does. For instance, if rook to e8, you'd be having flashbacks of an earlier game, bishop h3, where the queen was pinned to the king. Rook e8 here, bishop h3 would be a queen trap. So not falling for any of that. d4 break. Notice I don't know if it's how it's, set up, but I mean, these are very difficult moves to meet. The clock is running. It only has 30 seconds. How exactly to assess these structural shifts? Do I take like this, like that? Do I sit? Am I okay with that? Probably not. Okay, continues to grab space and set problems for Nakamura. We get the capture on d4 twice. Bishop h3, knight is in a pin. Okay, this is a point of emphasis. Could be pinned. Bishop captures knight now. Super dangerous connected passed pawn here. Pawn sacrifice. Chop, rook d3. Bishop b6. Now there is a dangerous pawn on b6. And doubling up the rooks. Sneaks in a check here on e5. Rook captures rook. And it says it's holdable, but how do you hold this? This is a beautiful game. Look at what this white king is doing. Wow. The queen and rook are just playing on these back ranks. And coming up here, we have a real stunning move. Queen e7. She's poison. Rook captures queen. We would have mate. It's queen captures queen here. And this king is now super active. Decisive position here. A second pawn will be down for the count shortly. This pawn is not going to go any further. Here we are, winning a second pawn, and at this point here, after move 52, a resigner. Moving on. Next game here, d4 game. Bishop f4. Space on the queen side. Preserve the material. I was a little surprised to see the pawn just given up like that. Okay, we're working with a half open position. Dangerous pawn duo. Queenside castles. Normally you don't want to end up in this scenario. Try to keep it as balanced as possible, but easier said than done. Invasive h5 move. Do you play here and then this? Okay. Plays in the center. e5. Knight d7. Possible sacrifices now on e5. Giving the piece back, getting two pawns. Well, at the moment there is this pin, so queen gets out of any of that. Bishop c5. Preserve the bishop. Continue pushing on the king side. Queen h2, getting ready to kick the knight. Want to hop in here? It's immediately kicked, I imagine. At least pawns start to roll. g4, dark square bishop unopposed now. Got more exchanges in here. In comes f5, knight c5, f6, knight e4, and probably one of the most impressive moments throughout this match. This moment here, Leela does not take the knight. The move played queen h3, capturing the knight. The f file opens up, possibilities for knight f2. We're looking at a pawn advantage for Nakamura, a superior minor piece position. Maybe starts to be a bit too simplified. It's queen h3 here. Follow up c5. Quick note, if knight f2, that's tempting. Seems like a massive fork, but it would run into queen h4, targeting the knight and threatening then to swipe the knight with a fork. So tempting, but also terrible. It's c5 in this game. Knight for bishop exchange. Finally, that knight is tracked down. Major piece specific ending with a thorn here on h6. Pawn captures, and the attention now shifting towards the queen side. Queen babysitting this point here. An eye on a back rank square. b5, and now queen captures b5. That's the final move of this game. Still reading equal, but there's really not going to be any save here with this queen so active. There isn't a great way to simplify. There is a check here, but so what? After king to b1, there isn't a great follow-up, and yeah, there's these dangerous ideas lurking. A good moment to resign, I would say. Okay, moving on. Here we go. Another game. Bishop g5 early on in this one. Space. Benko Gambit-like approach by Nakamura. Fianchetto coming up on the king side. Pressure on b2. Yeah, we got open lines very early on in this one. Feels promising. Okay, bishop parked on this diagonal here. Push c4. d4 is a weakness. Let's hop to this d4 square. Now, it's a two pawns versus knight imbalance. Space for Leela. Okay, dark square bishop exchange occurs only on this square. That's what Leela is saying. If this exchange is allowed without a structural change, this knight is going to end up on a fantastic square. So this is being factored in. Control over that c5 square after bishop captures bishop. Knight c5 in this game. Bugging the rook there. Got to undo your move. Queen c7, knight b3. Knight takes. Bishop c3. Queen d2 carries a threat. There is bishop a5 there with the skewer. When I initially was looking at this game, I was thinking, is e4 a move? e4 wouldn't be working. There's the capture on c3. Queen takes, and you're dropping that pawn. Okay, queen d2 here. Bishop exchange now. Big pawn here. The center can start to roll. Rook b4, questioned right away. Release some pressure on this point. Rook b6. a4, rook b4. This is a passer. Follow up e4. Nakamura falls back here. Bishop d7 is played. If bishop captures pawn, I was thinking there would be this double attack. But even better, there's this idea of f3, bishop f5, and g4 with the fork. I think, at least, that's what Leela would be looking to do. Tough to say, of course. It's bishop d7 in this one. Center continues to roll. A pawn picked up. Bishop challenged, and even going for this queen exchange. Very active rook, a knight here that's out of play. This pawn is influencing this knight in this simplified ending. Look at these pieces, not very active. Have to go passive here. Babysit the pawn. Bishop e2. f5. If you move the knight, so if you move the knight here, knight g7, there's g4. And look at this fianchetto knight. What is it supposed to do? Sort of taken out of the game. So the play here is with f5. Bishop takes knight. Rook a7. King defends the pawn. h4 right around the corner for Leela is a lockdown position, maybe with f4. And how does this bishop ever do anything? What are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do with the rook if you try to get activated on the b file? This pawn is going to be swiped. There isn't a good square for the bishop, so a pawn sacrifice here. And after the capture, at least, bishop g6 is there, and it has a clear view. Maybe a moment away from going into Pac-Man mode. All right. Flashy follow-up here, d6. Pawn takes, and now f5. What's the trick? Well, after bishop captures pawn, we see that trick in action, a fork. The piece is won back. Now, normally, this is going to be a draw between humans, but the pressure on the clock, under a minute, it's turning into a calculation-based position, a pawn race position. And Nakamura misplays it here. With rook to h4, the king is able to step back. The king will be there to stop the pawns. And next up, this rook is just ready to move. Rook captures pawn, and we would have that familiar trick in rook and pawn endings, a skewer to win the rook. Okay, another win there for Leela. Moving on. c4 game. Let's see how this one goes. Early g-pawn advance. Queen out early. Space for Leela. And what do we have going on here? A queenside castles game. Eventually we're going to see a doubling up on the d file. Big center here for Leela. Both pawns currently controlling these knights. At any moment, h6 can be a move, another thorn pawn. Okay, there we are with the doubled rooks. Capture, I mean, the other, how do you play it? Do you push? Do you capture? By capturing, you do activate these rooks, but okay, at least there's a couple squares Nakamura can work with now. This knight has some jumps. Hopping to c5 here. Knight c6, rook d6. Rook exchange nearby, but pressure here on the king side now with the g5 break. And this queen is a bit far off from defending here. The king side squares. So let's see the approach here. Queen c7, queen g5, nearby, h6 and this. He saw that one coming. He's playing f6 here, queen's there defending. This is a really sharp game. No time to take the rook. Has that responsibility. Bishop e4 played here. Bishop takes bishop, knight takes bishop, queen g6. Look at this position. If the queen goes down here, it looks so attractive, right? King a1. There's no follow-up mate, though. Knight has this one. The rook has this one. Okay, what's the plan? Knight takes f6. a3. Knight d5. Rook captures pawn. Queen sticks around. Still no time to swipe the rook. And finds a way here to keep... Oh, this is so sneaky, too. What a flashy move there is if queen captures rook here. I didn't even realize it when I initially went through the game. Pawn captures rook under promotion to a knight with a fork. Okay, that would be a painful one. This is a nearly impossible task here for Nakamura. This king is stripped of any pawn defense. Leela's king has adequate home here, for sure. A3, B2 structure. So, ducking the activity here, the play of these three pieces, good luck. Not happening. So, rook, probably the best piece in the position, I would say. Raking the 6th rank, ready to track a pawn. We see just that. And it's no longer any significant material imbalance here. Stockfish's eyes, minus 3.3, but how are you finding the correct way forward? There's probably a very narrow path, and Leela just knows that you're not going to find it in this wide open position. I mean, look at this move. Just perfect. Coordinating there on h7 with the rook. A knight right in the center. Apparently black doesn't have anything wonderful here now. Cutting out any queen check. Knight being dislodged from its center post. And now the majors sweeping in on the king side. Knight f5. And by this point, you could just go for the exchange. You're getting a knight in the end, and you are up 3 big pawns. A resigner here. Leela with another win. Moving on. C4 game. Another kingside fianchetto. Space for Leela in the center. And in this one, an early rook b1. Follow up b4. Nakamura plays c5 here. I'm thinking if there's this capture, we would see e4. Preventing the light square bishop exchange. Looking forward to e5, or who knows, maybe some slower approach to dislodge the knight first. Okay, in short, I think that move would be met with e4. We have c5 in this game. So a lot of tension here. Exchanges are going to happen. Not too many, though. No light square bishop exchange. Capture on c5. There's no trick here. There's a recapture on f2 with the queen. Right around the corner, there was this pin idea. Nakamura is out of that. And he overlooked this trick here. We're now looking at 2 minor pieces versus a rook imbalance. So let's see how Leela tries to break this position down. This is the strong, probably, yeah, I would identify the bishop on b6 as the strongest piece in the position. Unopposed bishop pointing at the king. So this pawn is only just a step out from challenging that piece. Okay. Already, there was a threat. Bishop on b7 was unprotected. Out of any pin here on the diagonal. Okay, doubled up on the b file. Another exchange in here. And I imagine it feels comfortable here for Nakamura. Still working with these two. Gonna get another exchange in here. Knight g4 right around the corner. The knight under control here. King probably best on that light square. And we're gonna get a bunch of exchanges now, so gotta go with the queen. Bishop was on the queen there. 2 minors versus the rook. Now, trying for knight c5, that would run into c5, or excuse me, a5. And there's going to be rook captures c5 shortly. So it's a5 here, and now the king walks towards the king side. This is a slick move. This is creating a target here on a5, h5, if I can name a square. And now this pawn is going to be tracked down. Both players working with a passed rook pawn. But this is not an easy one to stop. Yeah, it's the faster pawn. The rook is too good here. Stockfish calls it equal, but not anymore. The rook is running wild, and right around the corner, there's now this idea of e5, not even allowing the bishop to sacrifice itself for the pawn. There's a check flicked in, king g5, pawn runs, rook a7. They are just in time. You could take the rook, but this one's going to fall. That's how Nakamura plays it at this stage. Otherwise, you're just collecting this pawn and then falling back here and promoting. Also, look at the clock situation, under 10 seconds for Nakamura. All right, plays on for just a little bit more. And in this one, once the A pawn falls right here, he resigns. Leela with another W. Moving on. Okay. Yeah, in all these games, if you haven't noticed, no king knight for all of these games. You do have the option. You can mix it up. No queen knight, no king knight. Another Jobava London start to this one. And an early pin. He knew this was coming. A3. He did this on purpose. He wanted to see that because now right around the corner there's B4. Cracking open a file. Okay, expansion in the center, B4, sure enough. Got a pin. This point may be ready to collapse. Out of the pin, defensive E4. Space grab. G5, yet again. Bishop E5. Pretty irritating move to deal with here. How do you handle this pressure on G7? He just gives it up at this stage. I mean, if you're pushing F6, you're opening more lines. The bishop is vulnerable. Not the way he plays it. Goes on the attack here. Queen A5, pawn picked up. And knight here with tempo. Bishop preserved. Bishop takes knight. You have to go with the queen here. If you take with the pawn, yeah, I believe this is going to be really strong. And mates right around the corner. So it's queen captures here. Queen's not on board. But this bishop is still on board, and it is a very strong piece. How strong exactly? Well, first things first, let's cover this square. Check this move out. Bishop E5. You see what just happened there? This bishop has killed the rook. This structure here and this bishop right here are controlling these three pieces. That's how I see it, at least. 5 points controlling 11. What are you supposed to do here? The king takes a step back, looking to challenge the bishop. And after C4, Nakamura resigns. This is a positional crush. Stockfish says you're still in it, but you're not finding a way as a human. If you go in for knight takes C4, the knight is swiped. And how do you get out of this situation? How do you challenge this bishop here? How do you break down this structure here? You're completely bottled up. Is there anything really stopping the king from maybe walking in this direction right here? Rook's activating like this. What a crushing position. This dark square bishop, a real nightmare. Okay. Final move to this game. Star finish. C4. Moving on. Another game here. E4, E5 battle. Kingside fianchetto. Early F-pawn advance. Big center now for Leela. No capture. I think if this is on board, this could be a move. And there isn't a follow-up, well, a convenient defense to address the pinned knight. You'd be running into D5, I think at least. Bishop is stuck. Okay, bishop captures knight. Unopposed dark square bishop in this one. Alpha 0 pawn. Yet again, pawn on E5. And from here, pressure on the knight. Undermining Nakamura's center now. A little fork. It's the knight that ends up recapturing. But this rook is able to stay active. When I was initially looking at this one, my eye was drawn to an exchange sacrifice here. But the play here is with rook h4, nearby queen h5, going straight for this king. First, the knight kicked. In comes queen h5, h6, and now the bishop under development, clearly setting up a sacrifice here. He chewed on this one for a while, Knew this sacrifice was coming. Plays queen d7. You're just not going to be able to defend this. It's too much. Under 30 seconds at this point. Look at these pieces here. Not doing anything. All of these pieces doing something here on the king side. Okay, queen takes h6. Of course, you keep the queens on board right around the corner. Rook h5, rook g5. Not happening. How are you supposed to defend this? In fact, after queen h4 here, only a 25 mover. Nakamura resigns. Too much going on. Threat here, maybe a check there, maybe g4. There's no defense here. Okay. Another W for Leela there. A miniature. This time around, a Scandinavian defense. And how do things play out here? We see some interesting pawn moves on the king side in this one. Early, very, very early space grab in this one. Look at all the pawns stepping up here. Here we go. This next sequence is really something. F5. Pawn takes. H5. Bishop back. And now G5. Okay, the bishop is shut out of the game with that sequence. Now this bishop is ready to spring to life. Also, shutting down this diagonal means that you have time to flick in a queen move with tempo. There will be a check and the king could go queenside. Okay, we get the capture on G5, check, knight e4, queenside castles, kingside castles, knight takes, preserve the dark square bishop. I believe this next move is important. Rook D to F1. I believe one of the points there is to cover this F5 square. Otherwise, this here could be an idea. Let's say E3, pitching the pawn, and then queen here, looking at that diagonal. I think at least. Okay, it's an active move. However you look at it, controlling F5, coordinating on F7, knight D7, H6. Do you want this H file to open up? Nakamura says no. Now this bishop is not so bright. Queen takes pawn. Rook A to E8. And now winning for Leela. Just like that. Rook captures F7. Rook takes F7. And after move 22, Rook F1, Nakamura resigns yet again. Crushing game right there. Very cool sequence of pawn moves there on the king's side. That's one to look back on. All right, moving on. Next game here. E4, E5 start. Bishop D3. So awkward. It should be punished. Let's see how it's maybe punished. All right, things are cool back home. Rook is active. King is cozy. Far away from any trades here. Knight on E4. Taming this knight here. Cutting out any jumps in the center. Expansion as well. Okay, C3 with B4. Disturbing the knight. Any moment now. Knight for bishop exchange. A4. Nearby, this was an idea. Bishop A3 with B5, so Nakamura is sniffing that one out already. In comes A5. Bishop A3. B5. This is a sneaky move. Knight captures pawn now. Why give up that pawn? Bishop underdevelops now. Targets the knight. And there's no stopping C4, targeting the knight, and E5. So the A pawn is picked up, but Leela gets, at the end of the day, this E pawn in exchange. Big center pawn. This dark square bishop is quite the piece here. Very, very strong post on C3, holding everything together. Also, this is a potential target on G7. Okay, space on C6 with a pawn to C6. Rook e3, rook g3, there we go. Some coordination on g7. Queen f3, nearby there's this idea, rook captures bishop, bishop captures knight. Offer a queen exchange, declined naturally. Queen takes b5. h4, at some point h5, crashing through on g7. Nakamura shuts that down. But now there is an exchange sacrifice. Leela hasn't answered everything. After pawn captures rook, there's queen e7, and after these 29 moves, Nakamura resigns yet again. Big problem here on g7. Computer points out, I believe, this knight could jump in here. One of the knights, yeah, I believe it's saying this knight could jump in here to interfere with the coordination. I'm sorry, this knight here it's pointing out, and then as a follow-up, there's bishop captures knight, and black is not able to recapture in any way. After this, bishop captures knight, knight takes, that would be mate. Knight here, chop, queen or rook captures, you're going to hang the knight. And there's an issue there. It says best is after this, chop, you don't take the piece back. Apparently queen c5 is an only move. Okay. Doesn't play on from here. 29 mover. Leela with another W. Moving on here. D4 game. D4, bishop f4. Big center early on. Queen being developed super early in this one. Bishop e3. Queenside castles. Big weaknesses here. Pawns rule very fast. There's no time really for bishop g4. This had my attention when I was initially going through the games. Bishop g4, the queen takes a step back. Bishop takes rook, pawn takes knight is there. Pawn is going into Pac-Man mode. So that would not be good. Knight c6 in this one. Cuts out any bishop move there. Queen f3. Two vulnerable points. e5 on board. Knight d7. And after move 15, Nakamura resigns. So Stockfish says still winning for black, but there's some tilt going on here. Just not comfortable whatsoever with the type of position he's in right now. So very early resigner there. 15 mover. Okay, final game here. We have a c4 start to this one. Kingside fianchetto. And working with this c4, d4 duo in this one. We eventually see c5. And I think in general, when this is on board, it's good news. It's going to spark, I feel, at least one minor piece exchange, and a couple pawns are going to be exchanged. So we see that in this one. We get a knight exchange. Now there is a cost in this case. Nakamura loses a pawn, but the position has opened up significantly. Let's see the approach now. Maybe going after this pawn here, some control over the knight. c4 push with the idea of bishop c5. Okay. Capture on d4. Now this pawn is hit 3 times. There isn't going to be a way to defend it. Leela's going to be playing now 2 pawns for the knight. b4. Rook takes. We have some repetition going on here, but Nakamura plays on. Let's see the approach here. One passed pawn. There's a pin. You got to unpin with queen f2. King off of the same diagonal as the queen. And now this is leading to simplification. We're going to get the rooks off now. Rook check. Queen takes. Queen takes. And from here, the b pawn starts to run. Possibilities to break down Leela's position with g4. And e4 ready to collapse. You have h4, queen b4, follow up e5, and now this queen super active. Look at how it just cuts out everything. It targets the pawn, prevents this check, this check, this check, has an answer to everything. It's unreal. This final game ends up with a perpetual check here. Finally stopped the bleeding there. Before this final game, Leela had 10 consecutive wins. This is just an amazing bot. Final tally for this match, Leela's score here, 13 wins, 2 draws, 1 loss. Just the very first game. Anyhow, what are your thoughts with this one? Did you predict that type of score? Feel free as usual to leave any feedback to this video in the comments section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.